We're here wrapping up the Data Cloud Summit, and I'm here with Carlos Rivero, the Chief Data Officer for the Commonwealth of Virginia. Carlos, thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure, Jake. Thank you for having me.
So Carlos, it's January. We're kicking off 2021. What are the biggest priorities in the government space for data management?
So for us is to continue to derive intelligence from our data. Being able to look at the way we manage data, the way data flows within the organization and how that data becomes information, knowledge, and ultimately intelligence, be able to continue refining that process and squeeze out as much intelligence as we possibly can from our data assets, which includes obviously improving data analytics, incorporating machine learning, and really building out our capacity for making the most of our data assets.
And I think it's hard to talk about 2021 without talking about what happened in 2020. How has COVID-19 really further emphasized the need for strong data management and data sharing practices for you?
So Jake, I think it's funny. It's not that it happened in 2020, it's still happening in 2021, right? And so we're still in the middle of all of this stuff. And yes, COVID has really made it clear about how good data governance really facilitates our ability to make data-driven decisions, right? It's not just about data management, but it's also about data governance, right? Getting the right people at the table to make the right decisions at the right time is critically important for us to be able to generate the intelligence that we need to make these decisions that impact people's lives. At the end of the day, we're asking people to change their individual day-to-day behaviors for the greater good, right? And so we need to be able to do that in a very data-driven way, in an evidence-based way, so that the individuals can start having confidence in our ability and trust in our ability to make the best decisions on our behalf, on our collective behalf. And so that really, being able to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic has really shown a really bright light on the importance of data governance in this process, which for many, governance, especially in government, right, is a dirty word sometimes because we think bureaucracy, we think hoops, we think obstacles. But the reality is just bringing people to the table to have these important conversations so we can streamline our efforts down the road. And that's what I think is critical in our ability to move forward.
So as Carlos, you were talking about the response to the pandemic. As agencies weather this storm and deal with the challenges that the pandemic brought, digital transformation was so important. As agencies are looking to adopt cloud and things like AI, even emerging technology like AI, what should they consider when it comes to their data?
Definitely data security, right? First and foremost, right, making sure that the cloud environments that you're leveraging have been vetted, have been approved by your security staff to make sure that all security controls are in place, all policies are in place, all procedures are in place to make sure that you're using those platforms to the most secure way possible. But also looking at what kinds of data are you putting into these platforms. That you don't have to put PII data into these platforms to make them, to make the most use of that information. You can do creative, innovative things by separating out your data streams, doing entity resolution behind the scenes within your secure environment, creating crosswalk tables that integrate individuals across multiple systems, but using their hashed identifiers, not their actual identifiers, and then using that crosswalk table to be able to integrate data sets, right? So be able to create innovative solutions that limit the exposure of your PII into these environments, but also start thinking about data ethics, right? Start thinking about, the inherent biases in some of the data collection practices you already have, right? Because the way you collect your data already has a certain amount of bias built into it. And it's not, it's not malicious in any way. It's just the way that, agencies have normally collected their data. Don't bring that bias to the cloud, right? If you're looking at re-engineering your environments, really think back into your business processes and how there are some biases built in and how do you mitigate and remedy some of those issues as you're modernizing, as you're migrating to the cloud. Don't just think lift and shift, think re-engineering, think reimagining, redesigning, so that you're able to mitigate some of these issues that we have that we don't really find until you start looking at the data more critically and then realize, oh, wow, we've got an issue, we need to address it. And then you need to walk that back, which is a lot more costly when you do it after the fact.
You know, a big part of the conversation we've been having around data over the last couple of years in state and local government specifically has been around data sharing and the rise of the chief data officer like yourself to sort of coordinate all of that work within government. So as we talk about data sharing increasing, how should agencies and organizations think of the security risks that are present in data sharing, kind of based on your last point?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So within the Commonwealth, we have the Commonwealth Data Trust, right, which is our legal framework for documenting who's responsible for what in the data sharing relationship. So in any data sharing relationship, you have a data provider, and then you have a data recipient, right? And then within the data recipient, you have data users, individuals within that organization that are going to, like I say, hands on the keyboard, eyes on the data, right? They're the ones that are actually going to be looking at the data, the sensitive data that we're sharing. But in the Commonwealth, we've also implemented the role of the chief data officer as the trustee to catalyze and broker those relationships, but also to oversee that the organizations that are receiving those data assets are abiding by the controls and agreement, right, that we've established. So having that legal framework in place that clearly articulates who's responsible for what is critical, but then also being able to have the technology framework that facilitates the transfer of data assets from the providers to the recipients in a cost-effective, efficient, secure manner, right, that provides oversight and monitoring. And then lastly, I talked about governance as well earlier in the conversation. Governance plays a critical role in our ability to move this forward, because through governance, we're able to have a wide variety of different stakeholders from the data member perspective, right, the data providers are trust members, incorporated into the conversation so that collectively we can help identify what are some of the pitfalls, what are some of the obstacles, what are some of the issues, some of the blind spots that as individuals we don't see, but collectively we can bring to the conversation and be able to start thinking of ways to address them from not just a policy standpoint, but also from a technology standpoint. So, bringing people together to have those conversations is a critical part of how do you really broker data sharing in an effective, secure way.
Carlos, there's so much more that we could talk about, but unfortunately we're out of time here. Thank you for being part of the Data Cloud Summit, and thanks for being here chatting with me today.
My pleasure, Jake, anytime.